Victorian England. Coal and Steam by Braden Clark, Aidan Dolan, and Thomas Camilleri.
Fossil fuel consumption and the importance of coal. Coal was initially used as a substitute for wood. It has a very high density per unit, resulting in a longer lasting and more efficient fuel source than wood. Coal was developed naturally from the carbonization of dead plant matter. In its purest form, coal is 92 to 98% carbon, and from the age of coal, it comes the rise of what we call the carbon economy.
Carbon economy. It can also be referred to as a fossil capitalism because of the high demand of coal during the time period. Coal presented only 10% of all annual energy used per capita in England and Wales in the 1560s. By the 1750s, the number rose to 61%. At its peak, coal accounted for an astonishing 92% of all annual energy use per capita in England and Wales. Coal quickly became the main factor in everything that was built in England. Coal allowed for high-quality bricks that could be mass-produced. While this aided in durability and availability of these bricks, many felt as if this hindered in creativity of buildings. Without coal, Victorian architecture would look entirely different.
Fossil economy. It could be defined as an economy of self-sustaining growth predicated on the growing consumption of fossil fuels. This also means that, in other words, that there was a substantial amount of growth in emissions of carbon dioxide. It's the main factor for global warming, but can't account for all human influence on the climate. Deforestation is responsible for 1/4 of carbon dioxide emitted into the environment, but only 8% of current emissions. Fossil fuels are responsible for almost all of 92% left. Climate change was first seen as a problem in the Industrial Revolution, and to the right you could see some pictures of what that looked like, where emissions of gases skyrocketed to new advancements.
Brick. Brick was a material used a lot when construction buildings in the 1800s. They were expensive, but it was a material that lasted, so it was worth paying. It is made using coal, but developments in coal-fired kiln created a brick that was smoother and less was wasted. There was also a black brick, which was more expensive than regular bricks. They were 4 pounds per 1,000, while ordinary handmade were a pound per 1,000, and ordinary manufactured were 2 pounds per 1,000.
Pros and cons of brick. Some of the pros include that bricks were manufactured to last, and brick factories were made by railways so that there was easy transportation. They were a reliable resource because they were always being manufactured during the time, meaning that there was so much material to be used that you would never run out. Some of the cons include bricks used a lot of coal to manufacture, and machine-made bricks were more reliable, so less jobs were available to the public.
Steel. The use of steel grew as the popularity of the use of coal grew. The use of steel increased immensely during the later years of the Victorian era. While formerly only used for small items, new advances in technology during the Victorian era allowed for it to be used at a much larger scale, primarily used for larger structures such as bridges and commercial buildings, only used for its strength and structural integrity as it is more expensive to manufacture and transport.
Steam. Steam played an essential role in the development of the Victorian era. It aided in transporting, forming, and assembling the materials used in this era. The steam engine powered trains, boats, farm equipment, and equipment used to produce steel, as well as other essential materials. The steam-powered printing press also played an important role in the mass production of books and newspapers during this era. From this press came the so-called Second Print Revolution, and without steam-powered engines, the Victorian era would look drastically different.
New technology overview. Without the massive leaps in technology made in the Victorian era, much of the architecture we see today would look drastically different. Each development played an equally important role. Without coal, steam-powered engines would not be able to run as efficiently or as long as they do with coal. Without the steam engine, steel would not have been able to be used nearly as often or on such a large scale. Without the mass production of steel, railroad tracks would not have been able to be produced with the same speed or quality, thus hindering the transportation of materials. Each new development filled a specific role in the development of the Victorian era. Without just one of these new developments, the Victorian era would not have been as astonishing as seen as today.
Colonization. One form of colonization is colonialism, and this is when a state takes over the economic control of a geographic region from the native inhabitants of that area. There usually is a set of unequal power relations between dominant center and its periphery. Another one is settler colonialism, and this is where settlers go and settle in a place that is already existing. There's always imbalances in social and economics in terms of power, and inhabitants previously in the colony were usually either killed or forced out. An example of this is the Native Americans during the European settlement in North America. The last example of colonization is internal colonialism, and this is where, inside the city, people take advantage of minorities living in the society, and this causes an uneven development, which then eventually leads to inequalities.
Next, we'll be talking about two major structures in Victoria, England. Panopticon. It was a prison designed by Jeremy Bentham. It used older design techniques in the New Age. It was approved to be built in 1813. The design was to keep watch over all prisoners, where all prisoners are visible to guards at all time. Prison cells set up in semicircle layout with nowhere to hide. The watchtower was set in the middle of the semicircle, where guards would watch over prisoners. The tower doesn't show guards inside, so prisoners don't know when they are and when they aren't being watched. This would help the prisoner follow rules.
The next major structure was St. Pancras Station. It was designed by George Gilbert Scott in 1864 and opened 1868 to the public. This train station was 700 feet long, 200 feet wide, and 100 feet high. This was built with a Victorian Gothic architecture style to match the rest of Victorian England. And the reason for constructing this train station was to connect London to England's major cities, Manchester, Nottingham, Sheffield, and Carlisle.
Wrap up. Victorian England was during a time of new and improved architecture as well as technology. This new technology led to advancements, but also increased climate change, like carbon monoxide as well as other gases being released into the atmosphere. New materials started to be used and new structures were being built, like the Panopticon and St. Pancras Station, as old ones were being torn down. Coal led to new colonization in the form of colonialism, settler colonialism, internal colonialism.